Welcome to the Scam Economy with your host, Matt Bender.
That's right, it's time for another episode of Scam Economy. I am your host, Matt Binder, and welcome, or I guess, should I say, GM, as the Web3 cornballs say, because today's episode is all about Web3. What the crypto advocates claim is the future of the internet. And if that's true, then the future is going to suck. And that's because Web3 sucks. Every day it feels like a new project based on the blockchain crashes and burns. And that's the type of stuff they want everything based on? But what is Web3 and why should you be concerned? Well, let's break it down. And joining me now, it is my pleasure to introduce Molly White. Molly is a software engineer, Wikipedia editor, and the creator of Web3isgoinggreat.com. Molly White, thank you so much for joining me on Scam Economy today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I've been following your work for some time, and we'll get to that in a minute, your prior work. But let's go straight to Web3 is Going Great. And it is a fantastic website that basically chronicles all the wonders of the Web3 universe. And by wonders, I mean complete failures, which there seems to be no end in sight to how many of these will just fail and drop and scam and scheme and grift and all those other wonderful words.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a little shocked by the volume, I would say. It seems to be, if anything, increasing by the day.
Right. Actually, let's start. I was going to ask you, how do you keep up with it all? But I think, a lot of my listeners are unfamiliar probably with what this whole world is. Can you explain for us what is Web3? And I should add an addendum here that there appears to be a belief, and a true belief among the crypto world, because it seems like everyone has a different definition, that Web3 means something different to everyone.
It's convenient, actually, because if you're in an argument, you can just say that it means something different, and then people can't argue with you. Yeah, it's definitely a nebulous term, and I think most of it is just marketing chrome, kind of. But generally speaking, I use it at least to refer to sort of the broad category of anything that is being built upon the blockchain these days. And so that includes cryptocurrency tokens, NFTs, DAOs now are being built around them. All of these projects that are being sort of pitched as the future of the internet, the future of the web. They will replace our Web 2, hellscape that is controlled by Google and Twitter and big tech and all that. That's how I define it.
Right. No, that's also how I define Web3, and I think that's quickly becoming the whether they like it or not, the de facto default definition.
I feel a little bit bad about my part in sort of normalizing the use of the word, because I think it is really something that's been used for marketing, but it is, if nothing else, a good sort of umbrella term.
Right. It's hard not to use the term. I mean, to explain to people where this came from, Web 1 is probably defined as the intro to the internet, the early days. Email, for example, is a product of Web 1. Then Web 2 was the social web, which is, all these social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. And, I guess you can say that those definitions, while also probably were marketing, creations back when they were first came up with, like it sort of makes sense, the progression from Web 1 to Web 2 and where the internet went. But the progression to Web 3, I don't know if you'll agree with me, I think you will, doesn't seem to make sense. Like it feels like a backward step almost.
Well, and I think the distinction that I would draw as well between Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3 is that Web 1 and Web 2 were names that were applied sort of after the fact. There was like a huge transition in how, people interacted with the internet. It used to be very read only because most people didn't have websites of their own, and there weren't social networks where it was really easy to post your thoughts online. And so when we transitioned from that to a pretty different sort of internet where everyone can sort of put content online, it made sense to sort of draw a distinction there. But now we have people just saying that, well, it's all going to change, we promise, and it's like, well, maybe, but maybe we should wait until it actually changes before deciding if there's like a big version bump in the internet, if it really does, warrant a change from 2.0 to 3.0, or if maybe it's like 2.1,
Right. Or maybe we somehow went back to like 1.9 or something.
Yes.
It isn't that's a great point. And, it's true. Like, I don't recall Mark Zuckerberg ever saying, sorry, Microsoft, it's time to move on to Web 2.0. Like, that never happened. It just did.
Yes.
So your site, Web3 is going great, which, by the way, for anyone who hasn't caught on by now, is a very tongue-in-cheek name, because Web3 is in fact not going great. In fact, I believe I'm probably going to end up titling this episode just straight up, Web3 sucks. Because your site surely proves that to anyone, whether you're whether you are coming in with a bias, like obviously you and I do. I would say our bias has a lot of factual, relevant data to back us up, but it is a bias nonetheless. Or whether you're biased the other way, if you're a crypto lover or advocate, or, you got a lot of investments in various different tokens. I think you got to look at this website and say, at the very least, a lot of this shit is going, under because they're just either not well thought out or just straight up scams.
Right.
So what are some of your favorites that you've put on your site? I mean, there's so many. I don't know how much you're able to keep up with it, because I know when I'm like working on something like this, that's like consistent. I couldn't tell you what I covered. Like, for example, I couldn't tell you who I spoke to last week on this show. So I don't know if you have a better memory than I do, but what are some of your favorite entries to your site?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does sort of start to blur together a little bit, I would agree. I think so one of the categories I have for the site is just bad idea. And that's where I sort of put things where it's just like, who came up with this and thought that this was a good idea? Because there are some projects that are just so out there that it's like, what are you doing? The ones where they want to save the rainforest with Ethereum NFTs, which are themselves doing enormous environmental damage, like, is a good example. So that's
clean
a category
the air by
that I
revving your engines. Like.
What's that?
I said, clean the air by revving your engines. It's
yes,
something like
right, exactly. Yeah, and I don't understand that. Like, there are other blockchains that are environmentally friendly, or at least more so, if you want to try to take that tack. But yeah, that's definitely one of them. Some of the DAOs really get to me. I find those absolutely fascinating, where by and large, it seems like the introduction of sort of token-based governance seems to be a way for them to shoot themselves in the foot. There are stories of DAOs having sort of hostile takeovers because code is law, and if you can get something to pass, then that's how it goes, and I find those interesting. And then there's the ones that I love, which are the ones that seem to forget that, like, normal reality still exists, and like there are laws and regulations and things like that still apply even if you have a blockchain behind your technology. So these are ones where like they just forget that copyright exists, or like there was one where someone decided that they were going to build a DAO around Magic the Gathering without getting consent from Wizards of the Coast, which is the company that owns that product. And they were so shocked and like taken aback when Wizards of the Coast sent them a letter that basically was protecting their intellectual property. They were like, I can't believe, Wizards of the Coast is discriminating against Web3. It was just this absolutely bizarre moment.
Right.
Um,
I feel like I've developed a pretty good understanding of this world where, I'm going to go through every one you just said. If it's a charity token, like it's promoted as like, in my opinion, all this shit's a scam. But especially when we're dealing with a token or a DAO or any Web3 project that involves a charity, outright write it off as a scam. 100%, there's going to be some sort of scam built in, or they're not going to get that money to the charity they claim they're going to, or there's going to be some blunder where only a very small percentage gets to that charity. Something's going to happen where it's going to all fall apart.
yes, or maybe the better case scenario is they're calling themselves a DAO, but they're not actually a DAO, and it's just like a fundraising campaign, just like any other. That's what I've sort of seen with like Ukraine DAO that just came about. I
Right.
think Pussy Riot is behind that. And I was looking into it and I was like, so if it's a DAO, is there the possibility that they could raise a couple $1 million and then the DAO all votes on not giving it to anyone in Ukraine? Could they just vote to like make a castle somewhere, or whatever people decide to do with all this weird, all this money they suddenly find themselves with. But I was looking at it and it's like, I don't actually know if there's any, DAO style governance in there. I think they're just collecting money that will, I hope, go to Ukraine, but I don't think it's a DAO, and that's at least the best case scenario, I think, because people, who need money do get the money from the fundraiser, and the people who send money to the fundraiser, it goes where they intend it to go, but it's not a DAO. It's just a fundraiser. We've had those.
Right. At the very least, I am actually looking into a lot of this stuff because for a soon to come episode, I'm going to be focusing on like the Ukrainian crypto charity type projects. And I was recently looking at the Ukraine DAO, and you're right. There was no DAO aspect to it. They did according to the wallets that they dropped and the proof, the links they dropped, the proof, they did seem to distribute those funds, but they didn't ask people who donated, which seems to be the basis of a DAO, even where they should donate. Like the DAO didn't even get to pick which charity. Like the 3 or 4 people or however many people who put it together at the very top, they just distributed it to a collection of like 5 groups that they chose on their own.
Yeah, and this happens like over and over again. Or some of the DAOs that do have at least nominal governance behind them, there have been cases where the project votes for one thing and then the leaders of the project just do something totally different. Like that happened with the Assange DAO recently. I was researching that, where they promised they would only do one round of fundraising, and they're like, we promise it'll just be one round of fundraising. And they laid out this process that all governance votes would go through. And then they just totally ignored that so that they could do a second round of fundraising. And I was like, well, what's the point then of everyone, quote unquote, having a voting share in this project,
Didn't they also end up, the Assange DAO, didn't they also end up like taking all the money and just buying an NFT with it?
I think I don't know exactly what happened with it. There was an NFT involved, a very expensive one, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure how that shook out. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I remember seeing a bunch of people very unhappy that their money to what they thought foolishly was going to help Julian Assange somehow was actually going to buy just a very expensive NFT. It's amazing because, like, listen, like the idea, like a lot of this stuff, like the idea, like minus, like take out the crypto stuff, like the idea of a DAO is quite interesting. But we've been using it for hundreds of years and call it a co-op or a cooperative. Like these things exist. They just go ahead and add the blockchain or crypto to it, making said thing even worse than the existing version, and then go look at this brand new technology we came up with. Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of a lot of the projects that I'm seeing, where it's like we're doing something new and revolutionary, and it's like, no, you're not. This is standard stuff. You just sort of slapped a very expensive, inefficient data store on it. That's not progress.
Right, right. And with sticking with DAOs, because I just find them to be so fascinating because they do somehow seem to collect and this is really difficult to do, I think, the most foolish of the crypto fools into one swath. The idea is also regularly pushed, especially within DAOs, like, oh, this is very, this is the purest form of democracy. Everyone who chips in gets a vote. And besides us even talking about how that's not even ends up being true. In a cooperative, yes, every member usually gets a vote. But in a DAO, I'm sure there are some DAOs that do it differently, but for the most part, it seems like the more tokens you scoop up, meaning the more money you have to spend and invest, the more votes you get in this DAO.
Right. And there's no sort of checks and balances like there might be with, companies where someone holds sort of an outsized share of, shares in the company. There's no, board or whatever. And so if there are problems with the people who own those, the majority of the tokens, there's not much you can do. That happened. We saw that recently with the ENS project, where one of the directors of it, someone surfaced some old tweets of his that were very like homophobic, transphobic, just really unpleasant stuff. And they wanted to have a vote to remove him from his director position, but he held the most delegate, the largest number of delegated votes. And so there was this question of like, are we even going to be able to pass this vote? And in the end, it ended up being that the sort of companies who employed him were able to remove him in the sort of standard way that a company would fire somebody. And it sort of didn't come down to the DAO that much at all.
Right.
And it's like, oh, great, that was useful then.
Right. Yeah, that's how decentralization works in this new world. A company sitting at the very top or investors sitting at the very top will be able to call all the shots in the end. Oh, wait, that's how things currently work.
Yep, exactly.
It's amazing. And on your site, you have a total amount at the very bottom of all the entries combined, what the total scammed amount is. And it's amazing to see 8.479 billion as of right now, March 8th, as I'm talking to Molly White. It is amazing. I mean, also we should add the addendum that a lot of that is also just like imaginary money that they've claimed and made up. Like we don't really know how many actual, dollars that we use in the real world were behind any of these projects.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if someone decided to go cash out the 8.5 billion combined, hacked and scammed tokens, that might be bad news for a lot of the crypto ecosystem. But yes, hypothetically, that is sort of the amount that people have grifted and hacked and scammed over just about a year. I mean, this project does not go back, towards the history of time when these things were first created. It only goes back like a year. And it's only the entries that I've found, and the sort of totals that I've been able to cobble together. So there's a lot of asterisks around that number. I don't pretend it's some authoritative number, but it's a decent estimate at least, and probably a lower bound, if anything.
Right. I mean, that's really the perfect addendum. Like you see that really high number that you're already mouth agape at. That's also just a number of what's on the site. By the way, a site that I created in just the past year or so. Like it's amazing.
Right.
So, continuing on these various Web3 projects, there's one that always comes up as a hypothetical, and you're probably one of the most well-versed people on the planet in this realm, and that is Wikipedia. Whenever Web3 is brought up, it seems like its staunchest, strongest, most driven advocates always bring up like, now imagine if Wikipedia was a Web3 project. Imagine if all those volunteers who spend time editing Wikipedia, imagine they could monetize that. Now, your whole background is, you have a big background in editing Wikipedia. Could you first tell us a little bit about your time editing for Wikipedia and what that sort of entails?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I've been a Wikipedia editor for over a decade now. I started when I was like pretty young. And, that involves what sort of everyone imagines it might involve, which is writing Wikipedia articles. But I've also actually been fairly involved with sort of the community governance of the site as well. So there is, something called the Wikimedia Foundation, which is a nonprofit that sort of handles all the money for Wikipedia, but they do not sort of govern the communities. The communities sort of govern themselves. And so I have been involved with Wikipedia as an administrator. I've also served a couple of terms on what's called the arbitration committee on Wikipedia, which handles some of the more serious disputes that sort of arise. And so that's been a huge, passion of mine for a very long time, is contributing, free, open access knowledge to anyone, with an internet connection, or in some cases not an internet connection. There are projects to provide Wikipedia access offline. And I care a lot about that. And when I see people use that as sort of the example of what a DAO could do, or, this idea that, well, what if we add tokens to Wikipedia editing and then so many more people will want to join that project, it horrifies me, because adding a paid incentive to a project like Wikipedia, where people are incentivized by a very, very different sort of motivation, I think would absolutely ruin it. There are people who are paid to edit Wikipedia, and there is a process for people to do that in sort of an above board way, although it's very difficult to do well. But the Wikipedia community has struggled with that. We've discussed banning that practice entirely, so that there's no, it is not allowed to edit Wikipedia if you are receiving compensation to do that. Because as soon as like a company or an individual pays you to edit on their behalf, it totally changes the game. You're not motivated to present them in a neutral, well-sourced light. You're motivated to make them look good. And that's not what Wikipedia is for. It's not for someone to put their resume on or to advertise their project. And so the sort of, pay people to edit thing is like, no, we need less of that, not more of that. And there have been, in fairness, there have been projects that have tried to create wikis, encyclopedia wikis, that have taken cryptocurrency and tried to make that a part of the incentive process. And it hasn't gone very well. They are not highly edited. The edits that are made are pretty poor quality. People are sort of, if you incentivize people by the edit, then people are incentivized to edit often and poorly. If you incentivize people by the quality of the edit, then you add, people trying to game the system, and like, you vote for my edits and I'll vote for your edits and all that. It just it falls apart in a lot of ways. And so I really get frustrated when I see that.
Right. Like you mentioned, like there are like, I don't know if this is what you were specifically referencing, but I've seen like, there's like black markets that like look for Wikipedia editors so they could pay them to like get their company entry or their own personal entry. So it looks like their brand or their name is much bigger than it actually is. And it seems like, that is highly looked down upon among the larger Wikipedia, community. A thing that shockingly has existed long before a blockchain or a token. I can't believe it. I almost didn't think it was possible.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Like there is something, and that's the sort of thing. Like I've mentioned this before, and going back to our earlier discussion about like Web 1 and Web 2, like that's the sort of thing that is kind of beautiful about the internet as it was created, and even like the Web 1 internet, and even in some forms the Web 2 internet, that like that original ideal, like that thing that the internet was always like the motivating factor for the vast majority of what the internet was supposed to do, and I think does, is connect people and give people free access to literally anything they could think of, an open source of knowledge and communication. Web 1 did a great job with the allowing people to get this infinite knowledge. Web 2, with all of its various different issues, and obviously a lot of big tech players have gotten very rich doing not so great things. But even with Web 2 at its core, that original ideal of communication, connecting the world, is still there, even with some of these really terrible companies. But Web3, like they're basically saying, take all the good before that, and we want to literally take all the good from Web 1 and Web 2 and just learn from the nefarious, terrible stuff that we got from Web 2 and just have all that like money hungry commodifying of everything, just entrench all of it. Just everything's commodified, and that's Web 3 now.
Yep. Apparently, this is what we are aspiring to do. I forget who it is. One of the crypto critics I really enjoy refers to it as the financialization of everything. I want to say it's maybe the Crypto Critics Corner folks. They at least mentioned it, so it may have been one of their guests. But like people see that as the goal, and I see that as the thing we need to avoid. And I think there's just a totally different mindset, sort of, with the people who are working towards Web3, where money is just this enormous motivation, and they are sort of shocked when they sort of run into people who aren't as like singularly motivated by it, I guess. And you know, I should acknowledge that there's an enormous amount of privilege in being able to sort of say, well, money doesn't really matter that much to me, and I'm going to try to focus on volunteering my time. You know, like Wikipedia runs into that a lot, where there are people who would make wonderful editors who just can't spare the time for unpaid labor. You know, that's a problem. But I don't know if the solution is sort of making everything you do a moneymaker or a money-making opportunity, at least. I don't think that's going to work in the ways that we expect it to. Or right. That other people expect it to.
No, absolutely. And I was thinking about that recently, like how one of the main things that is used, like one of the main, again, they always go with the hypotheticals and the best case scenarios. I mean, obviously they're trying to promote it, but like one of the main like pros that are used for like specifically like Web3 things and related to NFTs, for example, is like, oh, imagine an artist gets to, you know, make money off their art by, again, what an NFT is for people who are just tuning in. Basically a string of characters that you purchase that goes on a blockchain that is connected to a link that shows some form of media. Again, it's not the actual JPEG or video file or whatever. It's this token that lives on the blockchain that points to a link that shows whatever. But one of their pros for it is that an artist sells an NFT to their artwork, and then every time that NFT is sold down the line, they get royalties in perpetuity every time it's sold. But you know what's going to most likely end up happening is like anyone who ever tries to like, if that becomes the future, if they win, anyone who ever tries to sell like a secondhand product they bought is going to end up having to share a cut with like whatever company made the product. Like imagine every time you tried to sell your used MacBook or iPhone, you had to give a cut to Apple. That would be the much more likely scenario if this Web3 future became a reality than artists suddenly getting the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, I see that a lot where there's this sort of like Web3 will empower the little guy, you know, the struggling artist who's having trouble making money on their art, you know. And then, but you see that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you see these enormous venture capital firms, these huge companies like Facebook, you know, and various others, all entering this space. And it's like, do we think that those groups, those VCs and those huge tech companies all suddenly got a conscience and decided that they were going to chip in out of the goodness of their own hearts to this new future that's going to empower the little guy? Or perhaps they see that they could make a lot of money, you know, by accepting money from the little guy. And I don't understand why people can't even acknowledge that, you know. It's very strange.
Right. So how often do you come across like Web3 projects or some new crypto coin, like whether it's you know, a meme coin or some DAO? Like how often do you come across this stuff trying to sneak into Wikipedia? I would assume it's got to be a very relevant uptick in the past year or so.
It's been going on for a lot longer than that people have been trying to, I mean, Wikipedia is used in Web3 and outside of Web3 as a way to sort of launder someone's reputation. You know, if there's a project that's just getting off the ground, they stand to benefit from having a Wikipedia article because that gives the project legitimacy. And so people try to create Wikipedia articles for their pet crypto token or their NFT project or their DAO or whatever it is, and it's exhausting to deal with. I mean, there are so many people on in the Wikipedia community who are working tirelessly to try to remove all the spam, all these basically like ads masquerading as a Wikipedia article. Another sort of prominent critic of cryptocurrencies is David Gerard. Has he been on your show? I feel
He was
like
on the first episode. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought so. So you know of him then, and his work on Wikipedia for a long time has been to try to sort of handle this and just make sure that Wikipedia can be a reliable source for things like cryptocurrencies and these, you know, if there is a project that it's not being sourced only to the, you know, the Cointelegraph and all these sort of bloggy style websites that are not doing much more than just republishing, you know, PR claims from the projects themselves.
Right. You know, before we started recording this, we were talking online about how we both realized that we had a shared experience, I guess you can say, a couple of years ago when it came to a certain domain name registrar named Epic, and I think you landed on Epic's radar for your Wikipedia work, right?
Yes.
And so for people who aren't familiar, and I almost feel like I have another show called Doomed, with which basically focuses on like right wing politics. So I feel like we could almost transition and do an episode there too. But we'll stick with the scam economy. And trust me, this is going into the Web3 area. So Epic, basically, for people who don't know, is a domain name company that became very friendly with the far right. And they became sort of a haven, like any far right web platform or service that was deplatformed anywhere else basically knew that if they wanted to keep their domain name safe at the very least, they can register it with or transfer it to Epic, and Epic will be happy to host their domain name. And tell us what specific caught their owner, who, by the way, everyone, his real name, Rob Monster. What did you do to him that made you catch his eye?
Yeah, so my sort of past life, I guess, it's my sort of alter ego, I guess, as a Wikipedia editor. I focus a lot on editing topics that have to do with far-right extremism, particularly as it is, you know, represented online. And so I had done a lot of editing around platforms like Gab. I've written the article on Parler, you know, various other sort of right-wing online platforms. And as I was writing the Wikipedia article about Gab, I came to know of Epic because Gab moved their domain to Epic after there was a horrific shooting, and they were the perpetrator of it had been posting all this extremist stuff on Gab, and the sort of more mainstream, I guess, service providers like GoDaddy and folks like that deplatformed Gab after that all happened. And so Gab went to Epic. And this was also around the time that because Epic has been around for a while, but they only in maybe 2018, I want to say, started to sort of shift to this persona of really like leaning into the free speech, platforming the right wing, all this stuff. And that was when they were getting their start. And so Epic was vocally supportive of Gab even after this horrible shooting had happened at a religious location. And so as I was doing my research about Gab, I learned about Epic, and I started to read more and more about what Epic was doing. And I realized that they were not only doing all this stuff, but they were probably notable enough for a Wikipedia article. There was a lot of press coverage as a result of their actions. And so I created a Wikipedia article just about Epic, the history of the company. You know, it was an encyclopedia article. And of course, I have my opinions about Gab and Epic and all these folks. But I'm a capable Wikipedia editor who is familiar with writing a neutral Wikipedia article, even if I have my own opinions on the subject. And it was, a very, I think, fair Wikipedia article about the company. But Epic historically has been very, very resistant to people describing what they do. They see this sort of neutral coverage of their company and their company's actions, which involves platforming, services that have hosted far-right extremists. They see that as an attack on them and as just like a campaign basically to destroy their reputation and all this stuff. And so I sort of ended up in the crosshairs of Rob Monster's ire, which has been a very bizarre experience. He has sort of had a grudge for a couple of years against me, which has become more and more extreme as the years have gone on.
Oh wow! See, I got a whole blog post on me on their official website when I wrote about them. But I guess he's sort of forgotten about me. I'm sure there are a number of obvious factors as to why that's probably the case.
Yes,
yeah.
He's had more important things to worry about recently, I think.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that you explained it, because I'm pretty sure you know where I'm getting at here. Your exact explanation of this platform that, or service or company, however you want to describe Epic, that caters to the right, really does seem to have a lot of similarities with the way a lot of people in the crypto space act. It's been so it's not surprising in the way that like there's overlap, because obviously ideology wise a lot of the very foundings of crypto is based in like libertarianism, and we know that a lot of far right actors who were deplatformed from like various financial services earlier in like the 2010s. They got into crypto early and they took donations via crypto, and then they ended up actually benefiting greatly from crypto's rocketing to the moon. And that aside, though, what's been interesting to me is that everyone into crypto, and again, over the past year or so, it's gone way beyond the ideology of crypto. The vast majority of people now in it are just in it for the get rich quick scheme. They might not even have right-wing politics. They might not even know about that founding part of crypto. They just want to get rich quick. But then even they end up sort of falling down that rabbit hole and using the same language to defend whether it's their project, or just like, even if they're not in the business end of it, like they don't have their own project, just to defend their own investment as like a consumer or a customer or investor or whatever. It's overlaps with like that language, like the conspiratorial stuff, like straight up, like I was on QAnon really early on, and the exact language the QAnon believers use, I hear the same shit coming at me from the crypto advocates, and it's almost like I check their profile page and I'm like, oh, there's got to be some overlap. They got to be QAnon people too, or vice versa. None. It's just that both these different worlds seem to attract the same type of person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are sort of two things I want to touch on there. So one is the language of free speech and censorship resistance, which has sort of been a big part of crypto since the day zero. Since its beginning, that was a huge part of why, Bitcoin was even created, is to escape, the quote unquote censorship of governments and banking, big banks and stuff like that. And we see that a lot where, these companies or various services that are very much actively supporting the far right and often have pretty far right politics of their own, try to hide behind this sort of shield of, oh, we're not platforming the far right, we just support free speech. And they just start using their free speech. And it just so happens that it's really mostly far right people who are on our website, but it's a free speech thing. It's not a political thing. That's everywhere in sort of the online far right ecosystem, and it's happening again in crypto, where it's like, oh, you can't censor these social networks that are going to be built on the blockchain. You can't censor them. You can't be canceled. You can't be shadow banned. You can't be deplatformed. All these words that we see from the very far right, it's happening all over again. And it's like, and the same thing's going to happen. It's going to be the far right who benefits from this. It's not going to be the person who's just, posting their recipes or whatever online. The second thing I wanted to touch on is the sort of adoption of the language of the people who are sort of the true believers. I had a really interesting conversation recently with Jason Calacanis. I cannot pronounce his last name. The This Week in Startups person.
Right.
Where we were talking.
He's I think people more likely probably know him as he's like a VC now, but he founded Blogger, I think, right?
Yeah, he has a storied history of various projects. And we had a really interesting conversation. And he has a more, I would say, moderate take on crypto than I do. He's more willing to accept that it may have upsides. But we had an interesting conversation because he has talked to a lot of people who are the sort of quote unquote true believers in things like Bitcoin and just crypto in general, who are often fairly extreme in their beliefs. They are like hardcore libertarians or even anarchists in some cases. And there are relatively few of those in the community when you look at all the other people who have come in, like you said, to try to make a buck off of it. But the people who are coming in and trying to make a buck off of it are still trying to sort of adopt that language and those arguments of the sort of true believers around decentralization, around sort of censorship resistance, all these different things. But it's kind of an odd situation because they don't believe it in the same sort of extreme way as a lot of the sort of early true believers, which gets them into weird situations. Because if you are a true believer in something like decentralization, where there is no central party who can remove something, say, from a service, that's kind of another thing about blockchains is they're immutable. You can't delete something once it's been added. And so if you start talking about these social networks that are built with like posts being stored to the blockchain, we're starting to see that. And you start to question someone around, like, is it really a good thing that there isn't a centralized company or group or, whatever that can moderate the social network? Are you really okay with that? And you sort of start to push them on that. And it's like, no, they're actually not, because they're reasonable people who live in a society and accept that there are things that people can post online that are absolutely horrifying, right? And so if you press someone who's not a true believer on this, and you say, well, what if someone uploads, child sexual abuse material to this blockchain-based social network? And it's like things start to sort of fall apart there, because if you're truly extremist and sort of, all in on decentralization, you may have the opinion that like that's an acceptable risk to take for the trade-off of censorship resistance and all sorts of things. But most people are not willing to say that, it's okay if people post this horrible, abusive stuff online and it just stays there. And so they start to talk about, well, then, we'll have these platforms that just, they won't show that. They'll be the ones who restrict the ability to see that. And it's like, oh, so centralization is that's how that's going to be fixed then, And it's like, you can't have just a little bit of centralization. It's kind of an all or nothing thing, Right. So I think that's really interesting, where people are sort of trying to adopt the language and not able to sort of defend it very well because they aren't all in on it.
Right. I do wonder how long that will be the case, though. I agree that's definitely what we're seeing. Like that's the dynamic we see now, but sort of like in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where it's like, people who are making racist jokes on 4chan or on social media, like on Twitter with a Pepe avatar. They're just trolling for the lulz. They're doing it to be trolls, and then little by little, the mask kept coming off of all these guys, and it was like, oh no, wait a minute, that was just their defense. They actually are racist or white supremacist or full-on neo-Nazi.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm curious to see that. And I'm also curious to see how many people, I feel like I'm seeing it more and more where there are people who are getting involved in these crypto projects and in Web3 and stuff. And they're pretty open about it. They're like, no, I'm really just here for the money. I think I can make it very rich off of this. And I almost respect them for that. It's like, well, at least you're being honest and you're not trying to couch it in these very noble ideas around, banking the unbanked and, allowing, ending government censorship and all this stuff. Like, at least you're just kind of being out about it. I still don't think it's good, but
Right.
it's progress.
Right. I always say to those people, like, listen, I don't do financial advice like those crypto people who say they don't, but are actually telling you what to invest in. So if you're just looking at it at a get rich quick scheme, listen, I'm going to tell you why you should beware and not get involved, but it's up to you. Those people I don't really care about. People gamble, and we could discuss how bad gambling is, but at the end of the day, those are the type of things where I'm somewhat comfortable, where people need to, be responsible and, do things that they feel that they have a choice. What I'm worried about, and what this show is more going after, are the people who do want this to take over everything, where you would no longer have a choice. Like, if you wanted to be involved in the internet in any way, you would have to own tokens. If you wanted to use a web service, you would have to be part of a DAO. If you'd want to like listen to a song, you'd have to buy the NFT. Like, this is just, that to me is the scary part, because that's when, like, I think it's going to be really bad when eventually, I don't claim to be a Nostradamus and know when or if, but if this stuff crashes at some point, a lot of people will lose money. But imagine a scenario where everyone's forced in. Imagine how many
Right.
people would lose
Yeah. No, and I agree with you. I think we have a very similar take on that. I'm a technologist, right? I'm a software engineer. I'm fairly young, but I've been, a human adult for a while. And I don't know why I specified human. That sounded very suspicious, like something an alien would say.
money.
Um, but I've been aware of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and stuff like that for a long time. They didn't just spring into existence in 2021. But I was very apathetic about them, right? Because for a long time, they were a way to buy drugs or if you were, kind of interested in privacy and censorship resistance and sort of that kind of thing, then there was sort of the true believer side of things. And then, starting in 2017, they started to become sort of more of a speculative investment type of thing with all the ICOs. And all of that I'm sort of fine with, right? Like, people are doing all sorts of weird censorship resistant quote unquote stuff, have been for a long time. Decentralized platforms are not new, that kind of thing. And that, I think that's great. I think there's a lot of great work happening there. With speculative investments, again, not something I'm personally interested in. I am not a gambler by any stretch. But if someone wants to do that and they understand the risks and it's not hurting anyone, then that's fine. But in 2020, 2021, we started to see this sort of repackaging of everything as Web3. We started seeing these projects being advertised to the layperson, rather than the gambler or the technologist who fully understands what's going on, all this kind of stuff. It's like, maybe you should put your retirement funds into crypto, or maybe the kid should play the play to earn game where they're actually, there's a cryptocurrency involved. We started to see stuff like that. And then I was like, hang on a second, I can't really ethically remain apathetic to this, because what I thought was not hurting anybody and I just wasn't interested in has changed into something that I think is hurting people. And it's hurting people, besides the technologist who just put, a couple $100 into it and lost it all. Hurting, it's not just the gambler who, is willing to risk that kind of money. It's hurting people who are seeing this as an investment because that's how it's being presented to them. And it's hurting people who are vulnerable, elderly folks who are being told by their younger, family members or whatever, that they should put all their money into crypto so that they can, retire easily on it. Or children, even. One of the first projects that I covered in my Web3 is Going Just Great website was a NFT-based project being run by a group of young adult fiction authors. And I was like, you're selling NFTs to children. That's not acceptable. So I think we have a similar view on it, where like if someone wants to go gamble their money, I'm not a gambler, but go do your thing, as long as it's being done in a somewhat responsible way and it's not preying on people with things like gambling addictions, which crypto very much is, I'm fine with that. But, this is hurting people.
Right. The funny thing, you brought up the selling NFTs to children. The last episode 5 of the show, I spoke with Wilfred Chan, who actually visited the physical NFT vending machine that exists in the financial district of New York. And he showed me what the physical NFT packaging looks like. And it literally was designed to look like a cigarette box. So
wow.
so even the physical version of NFTs are like telling children, like subconsciously, like, you want to buy a pack of cigs, like you want something that's really unhealthy for you.
I wonder if they're going to need the labels on them like the cigarette boxes have these days.
Right. And it's you're totally right about the if people want to gamble on this, like that's the thing too, like that's what it is to me. Like people find like my old tweets from like the early 2010s, like from like 2012 or 2013, where like I was talking about Bitcoin and how lame it was then. They're like, oh, you're just angry that you didn't get in then. And I'm like, well, I mean, I also wish I picked the right lottery numbers the last time I played Lotto. Like that's what it is. Like I had no interest in it then as a speculative asset. I still don't have interest in it today as a speculative asset. I wish I could not care about this stuff. It's what you guys want this stuff to become is what's making me care about it now. If it was still just another form of gambling, I probably would not be doing this show. I probably would not be talking about it anywhere near as much as I do. Although I will say that the one fun thing that I do play when it comes to crypto is a game whenever someone tweets at me, do your own research. Is it a crypto bro or a QAnon believer? I never know.
Yeah, it's so funny to see that same thing used for COVID-19 conspiracy theories. You see it a lot. Do your own research. And it's like, how am I qualified? It's a similar thing with a lot of the crypto stuff. It's like, do your own research on whether this is a reasonable financial investment. And a lot of this stuff is like pretty complicated, right? If you try to look into, yield farming and how that works, or all of these loan services that are being created. Like, there's a reason that a lot of retail investors don't do these things. One of those reasons is regulation, because you can't just start up a loan business and like reasonably expect to get away with that, as an unlicensed person. But it's also really complicated and it's hard to make informed decisions in these things. I actually feel very similarly around a lot of the stuff that Robinhood has been doing with retail investors outside of their cryptocurrency involvement, although they have, of course, gotten into that as well. But, Robinhood, when it came to be, promised that it would, give access to, retail investors to all of these things that previously you had to be some, bigwig on Wall Street to have access to. And so now people can do things like day trading and options trading, and they can even invest on margin and all this stuff. And like you see the people who are doing this and it's like, Jesus, who let them do that? And I'm all for freedom and the ability to not need to have the kind of access that a Wall Street person might have. And that, it's great that people are being enabled to do that, but like they are not being enabled to understand the risks or to, adequately make decisions around these investments. And so you see things like Wall Street bets where people are just investing all this money because they see people who are claiming to make it huge off of, $100 investment that went to the moon. And they're just losing everything, and I hate that,
Right. Like it sounds like a good idea. Like make it easier for people to invest in the stock market, so they can. So like just the knowledge of doing that, or the money needed up front to do that, isn't a barrier to investing. And I get that. But like they had to go further and like, yeah, there's a reason why like it shouldn't be like, okay, you want to make it easy to buy like a stock, fine. But maybe there's a reason why it shouldn't be easy to like do a call option or a put option or whatever, because you should know how to do it to be responsible enough to do it. You know what I mean? Like that stuff shouldn't be easy to do.
Right. And you shouldn't be using as your source of information that anonymous Reddit poster drawing lines on graphs saying it's going to go to the moon, because most of the time it doesn't. And most of the people who are doing this are not making money.
Right.
And that's, again, I think Robinhood benefits enormously from the fact that people don't realize that. And I think a lot of these Web3 projects benefit enormously from people not realizing that. And I actually think that media plays a huge role in this, where we're seeing really irresponsible reporting happening, where they're highlighting a lot of these projects or these people who do make money off of crypto and off of a lucky investment, or they picked the right coin, or they, somehow made the right NFT and it made a lot of money. And they're not providing a sense of scale at all. Like, if you were to actually provide honest reporting on how many artists are actually making money off of NFTs, or how many people investing in shitcoins are actually, making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of it, I think we would be seeing a very different picture. But it's not happening. We're seeing this really irresponsible reporting happening.
Right, absolutely. I mean, CNBC, I feel like every other day there's a new story where they're promoting someone who got rich via crypto. And again, their version of getting rich is the number on the screen went up. Never the person actually sold off whatever token or asset they had and made the money for real. Like, the big thing for such a long time was the Dogecoin millionaire, the guy who held on to all of his Doge money and he invested like 100,000 and now he was a millionaire. Well, the guy never sold. He still didn't sell last time I checked. And guess what? He's no longer a Dogecoin millionaire. I mean, it's it's
not even worth fake millions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, on the irresponsible reporting thing, we're seeing, companies, CNBC or these various other media outlets that are at least trying to be respectable publications. And going back to the children thing, I've seen these articles in these publications about how a 14-year-old is now a millionaire because he did such and such, or he got into some, token, or he bought, some NFT. And it's like, wait a second. If you wrote an article about a 14-year-old who, took money, put it into crypto and lost it all, people would be like, wait a second, why did this kid invest in crypto? That's not great. Right. But because, they can find the kid who somehow was able to invest money into the crypto market, who did apparently make money off of it, suddenly children gambling is totally fine.
Right.
It's like, are you listening to yourself?
Right. It's so interesting how that works out. I mean, I guess it should be expected. Like, you brought up the loan thing before, and I feel like any conversation I have on crypto, like decentralized finance stuff, always come up at the very end, and we never get enough time to talk more about it. So I hope you could come back and we'll have a longer conversation about other stuff. But it's always when people ask me like, what's decentralized finance, I find like the easiest way to explain it, at least for me, the way I like to explain it, is like, predatory loans. Imagine like predatory loans, but you can be the predator this time instead of the big bank. Like,
yes,
that's what it like. How is that supposed to help the unbanked or the impoverished or people in poverty or the working class? Like, they always claim this stuff's gonna do. Like, this is just basically you saying, I don't like who's making money off of the current stuff that are already preying on people. I want to be the one making the money off the current stuff that are preying on people. So I pretend to invent this new thing that is exactly those things.
Yeah, and there's this sort of weird underlying belief that, we've got this capitalist system, right? Cryptocurrency is enormously capitalist, works in the same ways. And there's this belief somehow that a capitalist system without regulation will somehow trend towards equity, right? Like, the idea is that we will bank the unbanked, we will provide loans to people who have not previously had access to banking in the same way. We will be able to send money to people who don't have access to, solid banking. They'll be able to invest their money in this store of value. All this stuff will totally empower the marginalized, and it will provide money to those who need it the most without any regulation. And it's like, have you read a single history book? In what world has capitalism ever trended towards helping the people who need the most help, right? The only reason that a capitalist society helps people at all is because there are programs in place, there are laws in place, and there are regulations in place to make sure that people who need it are getting help. And, I would argue it's not going so great, but that's a whole different podcast again.
Right.
But it's like we don't live in a utopian society where everyone is, helping the people, lifting up the people below them. You need to be realistic about what's happening. We have unregulated lending happening. That's not going to help people. That's going to take money from people, right? And I don't understand how that's just totally, they're totally blinded to that.
I'm always really surprised that the people who constantly throw the slogan, have fun staying poor, at people who don't want to invest in their project don't really end up caring about helping poor people. It's always mind-blowing to me.
I know. Who could have seen that coming?
Molly White, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Your website, web3isgoinggreat.com, is easily one of my favorite places to go online because it is, I speaking of the games I play, who is it that is saying to me, do your own research. I also sometimes play the game, did I catch this specific scam before Molly did on Web3 is going great?
I should make a little,
I did. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, and I do the same exact thing with some of the other bloggers. David Gerard and Amy Castor both publish sort of like weekly newsletters that often highlight other things that have gone poorly. And I'm like, oh, I got 3 this week. I didn't get all 5, but I got some of them. So I think we're all doing it.
We should put that on a distributed ledger called the blockchain and just release tokens for each time we get it right. And yeah, I think that would work well. Molly, where can people find you online? And feel free to promote whatever you'd like to promote right here, right now.
So you can find me at on Twitter, Molly0xFFF. I also have my website, mollywhite.net, where I do a little bit of blogging about crypto stuff in sort of a more serious way than I do on my jokey website. And then, of course, there's web3isgoinggreat.com and the associated Twitter account, Web3isgreat.
Molly, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I hope you can come back sometime soon. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Scam Economy. And wasn't that a really fun discussion about how the future is going to blow? If crypto bros get their way, I should say. Because, maybe they're not going to make it. But we will make it here on the Scam Economy. And if you would like to help support this show so we can make it, go to patreon.com/MattBinder. That's how you can subscribe to this show each month and support its growth. You also help to support everything I do, such as my other show, Doomed with Matt Binder, which you can check out at doomedcast.com. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/MattBinder, where this show also airs as a video program, and we also do a live post show where you, that's right, yes, you, can call in, whether you're a crypto advocate or a crypto skeptic or whatever, you can call in and discuss with me. You can also support this show by following me on twitch.tv/MattBinder. And also, if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you get a free Twitch Prime subscription each month, which means basically you get to take money from Jeff Bezos and give it to me at no extra cost to you. It's like you get to be Robin Hood. So just go to twitch.tv/MattBinder to subscribe with your Amazon Prime, Twitch Prime subscription. And of course, you can find all the links where you could listen to this show, Scam Economy, at scameconomy.com. If you can, and this is a real help, go to Apple Podcasts, go to Spotify, and leave a review on each, or one or the other. Your choice, I guess. Good to diversify your portfolio, right? Leave a star review. Leave a written review. It is a big help to get people to find out about this program because this stuff affects our rankings on the charts on these platforms. As always, you can also find me on Twitter at Matt Binder. If you're watching the YouTube premiere or you just happen to get lucky and catch the podcast as soon as it drops and you immediately listen to the hour-long episode, be sure to tune in right now to the live post show at youtube.com/MattBinder. I'm going to say patreon.com/MattBinder one more time, so that's the last thing you hear. And with all that said, I will see you all next time in the scam economy.